guys, it's Matt from Cheltenham, UK Philosophers. Just had a really lovely conversation with Pai. He works at Tufts University alongside Mike Levin and co, and came here to talk to us about sort of xenobots, biology, and some really, really amazing sort of world-changing, cutting-edge science. I hope you enjoy this as much as I did, and I would love to speak to Pai again. A really, really warm, brilliant, intelligent human being. Hope you enjoy it. Hello, Pai.
Hello, how are you, Matt?
Very, very well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll just give a little bit of an introduction about you, and then if you could take from there. So you have a degree in microbiology and genetics. You have an MSc in biophysics, which sounds so cool. I want to sort of understand what biophysics is at some point. You have a doctorate in systems biology and physiology, and you're a research scientist at the Allen Center with Professor Mike Levin, and you're working on some potentially world-changing science, so you're really owning it. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today, Pai?
Yeah, so I think my journey started probably when I was in fourth or fifth grade, which is when my dad could afford to get. I'm dating myself here, but back when I was a kid, there used to be these series of encyclopedias. You could get these series of books, each one with one alphabet, and he could afford to get me one alphabet worth of encyclopedia, and I just read it cover to cover, and that's when I was hooked to just science, and in particular was fascinated with biology. And this was back in India when I was growing up, and then I sort of followed that path through my bachelor's and my master's. So did my bachelor's in genetics and microbiology, and then my other favorite subject was physics, and hence did my master's in biophysics. And then at that time, there was not much scope for basic research in India, so I sort of made my way here to US, and got involved in the systems biology and physiology. And the reason for that is that in every step I was trying to go a little bit deeper. So biophysics, so biophysics is a huge area, but the part that I was involved in was trying to understand the three-dimensional structure of proteins and DNA and that kind of stuff. But I wanted to know more in terms of like, how is that working? How is that functioning in a cell? So hence went a little bit deeper in terms of the systems biology and physiology, trying to study the structure-function relationship. And from then on, came to Mike's group, which was asking even deeper questions. Was trying to understand how these processes, cellular tissue level processes, are working across developmental biology or across evolutionary biology and so on. So yeah, I think, and particularly the biophysical processes is what I was interested in.
Right. Okay. That's really cool. Thank you. So in terms of the bioelectricity, is that your in terms of your involvement in Mike's project? Is it the bioelectricity? Is that your main focus?
Yes. So that is one of my primary focuses. So what I'm trying to understand is how these bioelectrical signals are involved in general forming shape in biology, or morphology in biology, and what kind of information do they have? How is that information encoded? How is that information read, implemented? And how can we tap into it and manipulate it for all kinds of effects like birth defects, regeneration, cancer, soft body robotics, everything.
Yeah. So I've looked into a little bit of your research, and I also watched a podcast that you were on. It was called the Wiser Tomorrow podcast, and just so a bit of a shout out to that. It's Tyler Gleckler. It was I thought that was a really, really good conversation, and you touched on this area of discussion around how does the bioelectric field interrelate with the individual cells, right? So I suppose just my first probably very daft question is that the bioelectric field is generated by the cells, yeah?
Yes, but not just individual cells. It's a
Yeah, yeah.
collective.
And then so there's some sort of feedback loop between the overarching bioelectric field and the individual cells. And so how does that work?
Yeah, so let me backtrack a little bit and
Yeah,
talk a little bit about what I mean by bioelectricity in the first place. So,
sure.
just to give a very basic idea, every single cell in nature, you consider from plants to single cellular organisms, one of the way that a cell exists is by creating a boundary between itself and the outside world, right? So that's the cell membrane. And every cell in nature has an internal state versus an external state, and the internal state is negatively charged, whereas the external environment is positively charged, which gives rise to this membrane voltage across the cell membranes that are.
Is that always the case? Is that always the case?
Always the case.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
The magnitude might differ, but the directionality is always the same.
Okay.
And this is present in pretty much every single cell in nature. In fact, it is one of the fundamental properties of life or of biology. And what you see and just to give you an idea how strong it is, if you take any generic cell and look at its charge distribution across the cell, it is 10 times the charge distribution that you see in a lightning during a thunderbolt.
Wow.
So that is incredible amount of energy that a cell is spending to maintain these gradients. So it's not just something that is housekeeping, it is much more than that. And there is much more nuance and meaning and function to it from a cell's perspective. So now when you come to multicellular entities, there has to be some sort of coordination between multiple cells in order to execute any given goal or any given function. So what is happening over here is the best way I can explain quickly is that if you have, say, a sheet of cells that is 100 by 100 cells, say, for example, and each cell has its own membrane voltage value. Now, depending upon what each individual cell's membrane voltage value is, it could generate, say, a flag of different countries based upon what the pattern comes out, right?
Right.
So and based upon that, then they will execute certain functions, what the pattern is. So that's how sort of they use it, at least as far as we know right now. We have a lot more to explore, but that's how I think they are using it to coordinate function across a multitude of cells.
Right, but each individual cell is still only kind of interacting with its neighbor cells. Is that
that's what
okay?
Yeah, that's what we thought initially, and that's what a lot of the initial experiments were trying to figure out. Okay, which neighbor is it connected to? But in a recent paper, where we used both computational modeling and biology experiments that came out of the predictions of that modeling, what we showed is that even the gene expression in an individual cell is sensitive to the membrane voltage of faraway cells.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So how they do that, I'm not sure. We don't know that yet. That remains an open area.
Does that explain some of the kind of the cooperating embryos?
Yeah.
So that's
yeah.
Right. Okay, that's really fascinating. And there's another thing about this Pi that I'm really struggling to get my head around. Just because I'm a bit daft and I didn't really listen much at school in biology. But
that makes for a good scientist.
Yeah. So it's a real steep curve for me, but they're the best curves, aren't they? Because you learn more at an accelerated rate. So look, what I don't quite get is that target morphology of the embryo, right? So take me as an example, right? So you know, this form that I currently possess, right? Then where is the information for that target morphology stored? So, for example, you know, take some of the amphibious creatures that sort of regrow limbs, and so it's a similar question to how does that limb know where to stop, right? It's like, you know, so is that being supported by the behavior of the cells, or is there something else going on?
Yeah, I think it's supported by probably not at individual cell level, but at multitude level, multiple level. And our current hypothesis is that the bioelectric patterns are where the information is stored. And what the cells as a whole are doing is they are doing error correction. So when you have a current pattern that doesn't match the pattern stored, they are going to take action and try to get to the stored pattern as much as possible. And the idea is that once they reach that pattern, they will stop.
Yeah.
So the error is 0 at that point, so they will stop. Now, this creates an interesting hypothesis, is that what if we change that stored information? They will now make something that they haven't made before and stop. So these are the underlying principles, trying to correct birth defects, trying to correct, make use of regenerative medicine and so on.
We're sort of diving straight. I know I told you that there was some structure to this, but we're kind of diving straight into some of the speculative stuff here, because I'm thinking, obviously, if you can do that, and if you have some understanding of the kind of existing morphology and which fields to use to promote regrowth in which areas, which organs, and so on, then you could go beyond that and maybe grow wings and stuff like in the long run, if you fully understand how winged creatures regrow their wings and so on and so forth, could you transfer some of that to, because we know from those wasps, don't we, that they can promote different kind of cellular behavior in those leaves, and they just turn into these kind of orange puffball things, and it's kind of like. How does leaf cells become that? Because that wasp has messed around with the bioelectric field somehow, right?
Yeah, but I think there is also some aspect of the competency of the cells. Like, I'm assuming that, I think that their cells are going to have some level of competency, and that's going to sort of limit what we can do. So, for example, this is a very crude example, but we can't create an organ or a creature that would live on Mars, because that goes against the cell's competency of, exploiting the environment and the nature that it's living in, or it's
and could some of that be constrained by the DNA as well? Because of course that constrains which proteins can be built, right?
Absolutely. I think DNA and proteins are very important, and generally the example that I think illustrates it a little bit better is say you want to construct a building, right? You need two different pieces of information. One piece of information that you need is how to make bricks, how to make concrete, how to make windows, and all the different components. And the other information that you need is architectural information, how to put it all together to make a coherent entity, right? So I think the raw materials, that is the bricks, the windows, and so the DNA is specifying that, without which you cannot make what you want to make. But we and many others have now shown that the architectural information is not necessarily in the DNA. And our candidate for that is, we are trying to see if it is present in the bioelectric patterns, and to a large extent, at least so far what we have done, it seems that at least some of that is in these bioelectric patterns.
And what's this is where we sort of touch on physics, perhaps, because I'm thinking if it is contained within these bioelectric fields, that's some of that stuff can be explained with quantum physics, presumably, right? Or sort of at least even classical electromagnetics and so on. So that suggests that if the whole biological game is substrated within electromagnetism, then I don't know. That's quite fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, and we are in many ways living in an electromagnetic universe, right?
Right.
So doesn't surprise that.
Well,
there are various phenomena that are affected by electromagnetic radiations and magnetism, including movement, migrations. All those. We just haven't gotten deeper into it so far yet. So that's definitely a possibility.
And this reminds me of something, if you don't mind me, I think I quote you on this. You I think you said in that other podcast that in some sense, but biology, physics, chemistry, they are just one subject. Once you get under the bonnet of nature, you actually, so eventually we will collapse all of this. We'll collapse it into physics, really, I guess, would you say?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say, because we can't really collapse it into one branch or the other. It would be sort of something altogether that encompasses all of
Right.
these. Like you can't have biology without having chemistry and physics. So yeah, I mean, every organism is making this transition from physics and chemistry to biology, right?
Yeah.
During embryonic development. So yeah, I wouldn't say it collapses into physics, but yes, these boundaries are being actively blurred by all the research that is going on in all of these fields.
Yeah,
So,
and it seems to be convergence across the fields where some of the fruit is born, if I might say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think initially it was good to have these separation for specialization and to get into the nitty gritty of things. But now, when we are looking at higher order interactions, higher level systems, it makes sense that they are operating across multiple disciplines. So hence, it makes us bring these closer together.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. I mean, I also think that in some sense, if we say actually we can root all of this in physics, then we're suggesting that the only kind of influence is at that ground level. Whereas I was talking to Carl Friston the other day. He offers up the free energy principle. It's very dynamic and it's tightly logical and so on and so forth. But he then says that there is such a thing as free will, because he's suggesting that actually there's some down propagation through, so we could say, well, let's reduce everything to sort of quantum physics or even beneath that, but there's influence at the higher scales, isn't there, that push influence down? Am I understanding that right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you're suggesting.
Well, I think that you think of those high level sort of morphologies in biology. They influence the lower level cellular behaviors, and that will obviously therefore influence the behaviors of electrons and so on. So it's we're not just a kind of clockwork universe that emerges from the upward propagation of quantum behaviors and so on.
Yeah. So a simpler way to that I can say is that at each level of organization, the higher level of organization is bending the state space of the lower level, or the play, for lack of a better word, places or things that the lower level can do.
Right.
And so then the further higher up level will reduce this. Reduce the state space of the one below it, and so on and so forth. So that's how it's kind of a nested architecture. But there is definitely a lot more competency at each of these levels than is obvious to the eye, because we see only one version of it that exists right now. But there could be multiple possible versions if they were freed from it. Right? If each level is freed from the influence of the levels above it, then it could do a lot more probably than what it is doing right now. So, for example, again, very speculative. If we remove the influence of the whole organism from, say, organ X, or the tissues or the cells from the organ X, all the possible things that it could do is probably much larger than what it is doing right now. Right now, doing only one particular thing because it is under the umbrella of the higher order structure or supporting the higher order structure.
Yeah, and in some way that makes complete sense as well. You should expect that, because of course we're compounds of these cellular beings, and they were kind of they've been around much longer than compound entities, haven't they? So they were able to form us. So why shouldn't they have the plasticity to? And this brings us to the sort of Xenobots, doesn't it? Those sort of frog skin cells that clumped together and formed a new entity. I mean, that's which kind of highlights exactly what you're saying, that the cells in our body are constrained by presumably the bioelectric field that coordinates their behavior. I got so many questions going off in my mind now, but there's one about the human, the organs of the human body, right? Now they obviously have that. They are themselves kind of meta agents, aren't they? Because they consist of a multitude of these cooperating cells. They have their own boundary. They have input information. They probably have some kind of basal cognition. Now, in some sense, are they just different animals?
Well,
and all cooperating together in the same way that you might say a Portuguese man of war, because they're made of different species, and we consist of different species within our gut and everywhere else. And so, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at embryonic development, it is a tug of war, or or another word to say for it is a trade-off um, between different tissues and different organs, because there is finite level of resources, finite um, uh, energy stores, and so on, and there is always a competition even within an organism between different cells and different tissues to maximize their their function.
Performance, maybe? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
performance function.
Mm.
So there is always this delicate balance, competition and cooperation going on even within an organism. And um, there are instances where if one tissue or organ is sort of leaving things on the table, the other tissues and organs will use that to their function, their advantage.
Right.
So, for
Right.
example, I think there are quite a few examples where even when researchers have changed the total number of cells in the embryo, they will still form the same structures. They will completely change individual cellular level morphologies to reach the same final goal.
Wow. Wow.
So which speaks to that aspect.
And again, they're observing the sort of command, if you like, or the cajoling of the bioelectric field to sort of do this in terms of the volume as well, you know. And so if there's only one cell, it does that, you know. That's
So not one cell, but
or reduce numbers.
So they've reduced the number of cells in an embryo, and still it forms a perfectly normal sized shaped embryos. And to take it further, there are this is work probably done in 1950s or so. I forget the exact year, but Frank Hauser is the name of the researcher, where basically they change the number of cells which become part of a blood vessel, and generally there are about 6 to 8 cells that wrap around and form a hollow tube, and they kept reducing it, and it still kept forming the same size vessel until the final final end, where a single cell wrapped around itself to form the same size vessel. So clearly both there is a target structure, target morphology that they are trying to work towards, and that they have a good level of understanding of navigating the structure, morphology, state space to reach that goal, taking various different paths. Because if it was a deterministic process, then they would have failed if you change the number of cells, because that's not the same path that it would take if it was just single cell, right?
Right.
So they're clearly doing problem solving here.
I mean, just actually have a sort of quite possibly a niche question on this, or a daft one. I was just thinking, in terms of this target morphology, could we be making a mistake in assuming that is stored somewhere, or could it just be a necessary emergent form according to some kind of underlying principle of least action or something like that? So it's kind of almost certain that we're going to arrive at that form because of some kind of evolutionary process. It's selected as preferable to other forms? Just I don't know, just any thoughts on that? I mean, does it necessarily have to be stored somewhere in the sense that data is stored somewhere,
Yeah, I think it's not it's not necessarily stored somewhere as a data, but think about similar to how you have neural information, right? Neural information is not physically stored in the brain, in the sense that it is more stored in the way the cells are connected to each other. It's the same extension of that principle. It's not stored in one cell or stored in one place. It is the way the cells are connected to each other, and that's why I think one thing that we can do is probably by changing these structures, we could explore the state space of all possible different shapes and forms that can be formed. Right now, everything that we see in nature has evolutionary baggage, has are as Mike says, accidents of evolution, because they are all carrying the baggage of the incidents that have happened in the past that have pushed them in one direction or the other, and that's why they are moving towards one shape or the other. right?
Mm.
If we free them from that baggage, maybe they will explore all possible kinds of shapes and forms, right?
Mm.
So that's something that remains to be explored. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because you could say about the sort of modern human physiology, that's
Yes.
evolved over sort of, well, in hundreds of thousands, millions of years, right? And it might, some of that design, careful with that term, but some of that sort of, morphology we've ended up with might not be relevant to our future aspirations. Just,
Yeah.
do you
And
see what I mean? It's like even a simple example, we used to be nomads wandering around. We don't kind of do that anymore. So perhaps we don't really need legs like this. Just as a daft example, is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
and probably we could do that at a faster rate, because we already are creating bionic humans by putting in artificial parts in that. I should say artificial, but like heart
Synth,
pacemaker,
yeah, yeah.
prosthetics, and so on. And
Mm,
honestly, going forward, it's going to be a lot more. Both not just things made out of metals and plastics, but things that are made out of biological material, right?
mm,
Yeah, absolutely. In Intentionally or inadvertently, we are already exploring this state space going forward in terms of quality of life, sensory augmentation, and so on. And probably it's going to go at a much higher pace from here on.
mm. There's an interesting thought experiment around that. If you imagine that you slowly but surely replace every part of the human body
Like,
with a synth, I'm sure you guys. In fact, I may have heard Mike mention this once before. At what point do you say that's not a human? And in
right.
fact, you're never going to say that. You say, well, actually, it's still mad. It's just made of metal or plastic. It's the process that matters in a way, doesn't it? It's not the kind of the fixed object, but so yeah,
Right. But
that's really interesting. Um, I was going to ask, sort of going back to the kind of the actual science, like just as a general question, how close do you think we are to actually being able to understand the interface to such an extent that we can reproducibly, influence, sort of, regrow limbs for a human, say? Sort of how many years would you say we are away from that? Is that okay? Is that,
I can't
if you're a gambling man?
I can't say in exact years, because there are lot of societal, ethical, practical hurdles that have to be crossed.
Mm,
But we are very close. We have been able to do it in model organisms, and so now it's the question of how can we push it
mm,
in human beings,
mm,
and mammals, and generally, because of all these practical implications, it sometimes takes a few years. But
mm,
yeah, we are very close in that sense.
mm.
At least for some aspects. At least for some aspects. I mean, there will be some aspects like regrowing a brain that probably will have a lot of time, effort,
Mm.
possibility, issues, all of that kind of stuff. But
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you're talking about regrowing a hand or a limb, then probably quite close.
We can, well, children already do that, don't they? Up till sort of
Yep.
the age of 10.
Yeah.
You said don't try this at home, obviously on the last one, yeah. But that is the case, isn't it? So again, we've got evidence that these cells can behave in that way.
Yeah.
So we've just got to find a way of recreating that
Yeah.
bioelectric field that supports it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you think about it, you are already regenerating a lot of your organs. Your liver is heavily regenerative, your skin
Mm,
is highly regenerative, your gut is highly regenerative. So it's not that we don't have it, it's just that there are certain, probably, restrictions from an evolutionary point of view that are there, in terms of balancing the effect of survival versus cancer versus
mm,
regeneration, right? So
mm,
there are some checks and balances in place, and we have to carefully understand that, and be able to navigate that landscape in that sense,
mm.
to do a directed approach to get whatever structure, whatever tissue, whatever shape that we are trying to regenerate.
Mm. I mean, that's one of the most exciting aspects of this, the cancer element. I mean, it could revolutionize, just change everything, couldn't it?
Yeah.
If you figure out how to just tell those cells what to do, and that reminds me of something actually, because there's this example of the guy with tremendously bad eczema on his arm, and he's treated by what's a guy who's known as a hypnodermatologist.
Yeah.
And I'd never even heard of those. I'd never even heard of a hypnodermatologist. And I thought that sounds a bit woo. It sounds a bit like this kind of, spirit healing or that kind of stuff. And again, some of that does work. Some of that has demonstrable sort of effects. And so it's kind of, in some sense, it doesn't matter what the interface is if you can persuade the cells to do what you need them to do.
Right.
But what are your thoughts on that? I mean, if it is the case that some of this Reiki or kind of faith healing stuff can work, because if it gets somebody, if you can directly just speak to, I don't know, the animal self. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? It's a bit crazy, but any thoughts?
Create a chat GPT for the cells. Yeah.
Yeah. But what do you think about that stuff? Because some people would claim they're already doing this.
Yeah, I think the basic fundamental biology is we need to understand what is the code, how our cells and collective of cells storing that information, and again storing in the sense that where is that information, how is it stored, how do they read it, how do they implement it. Once we know that, we can definitely tap into that information to reach the outcomes that we want, especially in terms of the healthcare and well-being of the individuals, for sure. But I don't think we know that completely yet. I think we have scratched the surface, but there is a lot more deeper understanding that needs to be had.
And Pai, what do you think about some of this stuff about these sorting algorithms and their tendency to do things like sort of delay gratification and things like that? And and there's nothing mysterious about these algorithms. You can sort of look at their basic logic and how they're supposed to operate. And there was one Mike was talking about sort of sorting the numbers. I mean, if we can see basal cognition in systems like that, is life just everywhere? Is everything involved in life?
Right. I mean, I would say I am not an expert at all in this area. I wish I had computational background and philosophy background. That remains one of my missed chances, if you will. But my speculation would be that we would need to empirically test it to say yes or no. And just now, we are starting to get frameworks that we can use to experimentally do some of these tests. And then we can definitively say whether X has or does not have cognitive ability. Like, for example, in the latest series of research done in the group, it was shown that definitively gene regulatory networks have ability to learn and remember and undergo classical conditioning paradigms and so on. So once you start empirically testing that, then you can figure out. But if we just say that they have it, then it doesn't mean anything. I mean, that's just sort of it's sort of like you naming me Matt doesn't change any part of me, right? I'm still the same. So unless and until we empirically test these, and now at least to some extent that is slowly becoming possible.
But I love the fact that you guys are so open-minded, and that you say, look, we're going to assume nothing. Yeah, and if you tell us the weather doesn't have any sort of cognition, then prove it. Yeah, or test it. Have you tested it? And so that's such a refreshing thing, because it seems a million miles away from the very mechanistic, materialistic scientific outlook. Everything's like a clockwork universe. I mean, I know we've moved on past that a long way, but it's still, some of those prejudices still, that teleophobia still lives on, doesn't it? And yeah, so
it's actually very liberating. It's actually very liberating to be in this place, because you're free to think the way you want, and
yeah.
You test it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, again, sorry to bang on about Mike, but he mentioned the other day that philosophy should have a role in science because we should be asking those deep questions and saying, well, what is cognition? We can't sort of arrogantly claim that we're the sole possessors of consciousness, cognition. So let's start. Take a step back from our presumptions and sort of step out, in a way, stepping outside of a paradigm that we've had for some time. And I mean, we've got philosophers now who have just totally thrown themselves in with physicalism and the belief that everything is ultimately explicable. There's no free will, there's no meaning, there's no agency anywhere except without. And I think you had mentioned earlier that there's a bit of a wake up process going on, revolution across disciplines as well. So neuroscience, biology, philosophy, physics. I mean, physics has been weird for quite some time, I suppose. Hasn't it? Because you've got a background in physics, don't you? So I was going to ask you again. So perhaps on the speculative side of things, but I was talking to about this meta agency thing, right? So it looks like cells do better when they're in groups, right? Obviously organs couldn't function without that sort of meta agency. There is, there's a singular boundary, but they're consisted of parts. So it just makes me wonder whether we're part of some meta agent. Are we part of a meta agent? Could we call planet Earth a meta agent? Especially when you look at all the things like sort of the mycelial networks that connect forests together. I mean, could we say a forest has opinions? An attitude. Just any thoughts on that? I know it's speculative.
Yeah. So some ground level facts are that, or ground level truths are that the mycelial networks have an information exchange that is happening vaster than the entire human internet.
Wow. Right? Okay. Yeah.
So the amount of information exchange that is happening is already, and even I'm not talking about the mycelial network in the whole world, just the mycelial network in like any given patch of forest.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Now you see how much information exchange is happening over there of all different kinds. We don't even know 1% of it. So I think when we take a step back and look at what we don't know, and then sort of, rather than making preemptive conclusions, just, acknowledge that what we don't know and just try to explore it, try to empirically determine it, then, at least I think that's the way probably forward, because it also, what it does is it frees you to develop new tools that will allow you to ask these questions, right? Otherwise, if you make a conclusion, you're not going to do any tools. You're not going to do any experiments. You're not going to ask any deeper questions, So that's how I see it. As far as, are we a part of some larger entity? In some ways we are, in the sense that we are part of the whole human civilization, right? Just like I was telling earlier, I can't, as an individual, just go and act any way that I want in the society. The society, as the higher entity, has laid down some rules that bends and shapes my behavior as an individual. And perhaps there are other higher forms as well. Who knows? Remains to be empirically determined.
Yeah, it's like you can get a letter from the town, can't you? It's not. Yeah. It's no one single. Yeah. That's okay. Well, I was going to ask, because I mean, you do have a background in physics, right?
A very long time ago, but yes, a little bit, yes.
But and it's a bit philosophical, I guess. I was just wondering, do you have any views on kind of the nature of reality? I mean, look, I've already kind of asked the question. Do you think that agency is just everywhere, right? I mean, is agency kind of all there is in some sense? And you've got this notion with the sort of observer problem. We know that we're seeing a kind of negotiated sort of impression of the world, right? It's not, our perception, it's not homomorphic with what's out there, right? So is space, I mean, okay, I'll just ask it straight. Do you think space-time is real? Is space-time an objective standalone domain? Or is it just in our heads?
Yeah. I don't know. I would say that I don't know at this point, because that's not totally not my area of expertise at all. However, on a smaller note, I would definitely say that I think Donald Hoffman had said that reality is something like a blue folder on the desktop of your computer. And you can play with it, you can use it, but that doesn't mean there is a physical blue envelope behind your screen, you know? So another example I can give you is that when I see a red pen or when I see a red flower, right, that is meaningful to me, but that same entity could appear completely different to another organism. Now, whose reality is correct? So are we constructing our own reality, or is there a reality that is beyond what we are constructing? I don't know. I'm not qualified enough to answer that.
I think that's a really fascinating answer. I think you pulled on a few different areas there, because I think that, you've got Donald Hoffman's conscious agent theory, and he's saying that, essentially reality is consists of just an infinite number of these conscious agents, right, various scales. And but then that seems to point towards the kind of Fristonian free energy principle, where everything is reducible to these boundaries. Everything is a nested Markovian boundary, right? And you could say the super boundary is the whole cosmos, right? But they all seem to be like pointers to the same kind of thing. You guys are saying agency is everywhere, really, essentially, and particular cognition, potentially even phenomenal consciousness. And so everyone's coming at it from different angles, but there seems to be this kind of concrescence across all of these different theories. Would you agree with that?
Well, maybe we are all right, or maybe we are all wrong.
Yeah, one almighty mistake,
Yeah.
That's.
I guess it remains to be seen.
Yeah. It sure does. It sure does. But I mean, I quite like this idea of agency all the way up, and the thought that I think in some sense, I won't get too mystical here, but it can give you a sense of belonging and purpose, and but within a broader telos, right? If you think about things that way, because there's been this tendency with the mechanistic science to think of ourselves as isolated in this kind of cold, empty universe. But I think that some of this science we're seeing now offers actually a warmer, kind of a more spirited perspective, and and so maybe these ancient shamans sort of saying that there's agency everywhere in the rivers and maybe they were right in some interesting way,
I mean, if you look at us, if we boil down, we are just physics too. I mean, so is any individual cell, and so is the processes that are going on inside the cell. So there is whatever we call agency or not. The fundamentals are the same, right? So where does that leave us? I don't know.
So do you believe that sort of electrons and things like that are real? Do they have standalone existence?
Again, I'm so far out my expertise here, so
fair dues.
Hard for me to say. And also, cheeky. My knowledge about physics is probably 20 years old. So.
Yeah, things move very quickly in physics, don't they?
Yes,
speed of light.
Yes.
So should we get back? How are we doing for time? Are you okay for time?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Could we get to? I mean, sort of. I know that stuff that's not published is a little bit sensitive and so on. But could you talk about the most recent stuff that you can talk about and where you're going? And are you involved in the Xenobot stuff?
Yes.
Because I watched a video on that the other night that's just unbelievable. So first of all, I was looking at these simulations of Xenobots, and then they're actually being built in the real world. And so I can't remember the name of the guy that's doing the microsurgery, but it's absolutely astonishing. And they're beginning to look like those virtual representations from the simulator. And where they'd come up with a way of walking, and it was it was Josh Bongard, is it? Josh?
Yes. I think all of that work was Douglas Blackiston from our group, and then Sam Kriegman from Josh Bongard's group, who is now an independent researcher at Northwestern University in Chicago. He now has his own group. Sam was doing all the computational work, and Doug was doing all the biology microsurgery work. Yeah, that is their work for sure.
Yeah,
and it's really amazing.
it's freaking amazing because that what that kind of simulated, it was trying to, basically it had one goal to get from left to right, didn't it? Right.
Right.
And then and it's got like sort of firm material, which could be compared with bone, and then sort of more fleshy, muscular kind of material.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it came up with that solution on its own, didn't it?
Right. I think they did.
Or is it? It's an evolution. They use an evolutionary algorithms or something. Is that? Yeah.
Yeah. And what they have done brilliantly is establish this platform of Xenobots. So Xenobots is sort of an umbrella term for, it stands for, so the name stands for, comes from Xenopus, which is a frog, and biological bots, so biological robots or bots. But this platform is really great because it encompasses anything that is made from frog cells that is not already a living material, living entity. Like it's not just a frog embryo, right? It's a group of cells that are derived from frogs, but from what I'm interested in is using them as a model system for, again, addressing some very deep questions in biology, because this Xenobot platform, and again, this platform is quite large. It includes bots of all different shapes, all different combination of tissues, and so on. But my interest is looking at some using them as a model system that is really, for the first time, unburdened by evolutionary decisions, by evolutionary accidents, if you will, and ask some of the deep questions, as in, what is the relationship between genome and morphology? Then ask questions like, if now that they are unconstrained by higher order structure, what kind of computations are being done by these group of cells? What kind of decision-making capacity do they have? What kind of possible morphologies can they form, right? What kind of experiences can they live? And obviously, as they can move around and they have a physical motion and behavior in the world. So how do they manage that behavior in response to external environments and external stimuli? Do they have some sort of, for lack of a better word, memory of these events? And obviously they don't have any nervous system, so how would that memory be stored? And how do they use it? How does that color their future experiences? So all of these questions are deep biological questions, are what interests me, and that's what I would be interested in using them for.
That's just absolutely fascinating, and that reminds me of this idea that if we're ever to have kind of AI that we could say, yeah, that's a bit like us now, you sort of feel like it would have to be embodied somehow. It would have to kind of like, it has to have sort of sensory input, so some sort of visual capacity. It'd have to, and there's all this talk about sort of mortal computation, isn't there? So software that, it might die. So I just sort of feel that if we're ever going to get to a point where we could say, wow, we're really there now, is an embodied AI that has a sense of its own inner, well, it has an inner, it needs an inner world, right?
Yeah,
sort of homunculus.
I'm not an AI person, as in I'm not experienced in AI.
Yeah.
I'm not experienced in computation, but I think this is the wheelhouse of Josh Bongard, and I think he has been championing the cause of embodied AI and embodied cognition. So yeah. I mean, I think that is what his stance would be.
Yeah. But so where you are is obviously on the Xenobots. What about the Anthrobots?
Yeah, I am actually not much involved in Anthrobots at all as of now. But once the Anthrobots are sort of one step behind Xenobots, if you will, in the sense that they have just been crafted, so we are still learning about them. what their capacities are, what we can do with them, what their behaviors are. So that is still being explored. So once we have an idea about that, then we can start asking questions about, okay, what can we use them for? What kind of questions that can we ask, and what kind of information and understanding about the basics, principles, and design principles of biology and morphology can we ask using these using anthropods. But currently, I'm not doing anything with anthropods.
Yeah, I've just come up with a crazy question. Actually, I was just thinking, what if you had infinite money? Just imagine sort of some benefactor turned up out of nowhere and said, "Right, guys, here's like a 10 billion quid. You can spend it on whatever you want." What would you do with that?
I think some of the questions that I just mentioned, those would be some of the questions that I would be interested in answering. It will take a long time, I think, but those are the questions that I would be interested in answering. I would then like to link that to, okay, how do cellular decision making and computation happen then in a higher order organism structure, in an embryo? Say, for example, frog embryo is what I generally use, and then try to understand how bioelectrics and bioelectric patterns play a part in that cellular level computation and decision making, and how does that influence? How is that implemented, enforced, and how can we interface with it? Again, the implications of this are everywhere from detecting and correcting birth defects, regeneration, cancer, all the way to soft body robotics, and even possibly biorealistic AI, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I mean, just thinking, just going back to the Xenobots again, because I mean, that wasn't to do with bioelectricity. These were just cells in a different, environment from that which a frog skin cell would normally be in. But imagine sort of combining those two sort of technologies. Because I'm thinking, you've managed to develop a new creature, right, from scratch that almost certainly hasn't existed before, right, in that particular morphology. So obviously the consequences of that are that you could eventually build entirely new animals, right? With this kind of it's not 3D printed, but it's kind of like the anatomical compiler sort of idea, isn't it?
Right.
So you could come up with.
And there are some serious ethical and practical concerns here that
it freaks people out, doesn't it? This stuff sometimes freaks people out, and it's
rightly so, right?
Yeah. Maybe because I mean, I think it's what was that? What was the film? Blade Runner, and you've got all these kind of. Have you seen that? It's
I have not seen that.
It's a science fiction film. It's a dystopian future. It's written by a guy called Philip K. Dick. It's based on a novel called I think it's "Do Robots Dream of Electric Sheep" is the name of the novel. Yeah. It's quite a good book, actually. I'd strongly recommend it. But it's become a real cult classic, right? And it's got these freaky kind of half human, half robot kind of creatures, and they're like dolls, but they can move around, and they're sapient and sentient. And I think people have visions of that and just think, oh, it's Frankensteinian, and they panic about it. And I think that's completely unnecessary. I think that's a complete overreaction.
Right, because we are already doing that, right? I mean,
nature is doing that. Nature is doing that,
and even we are doing that. I mean, that's what prosthetics is, right? That's what when adding a pacemaker or a stunt in your brain is. That's the beginning of it already. So but I can understand why people are afraid about it.
Yeah, absolutely, because of customs and tradition, obviously, and I get that, but it's well worth remembering that, as you pointed out earlier, that there is that health care element to this, and you guys get emails from people saying, look, when are you going to sort this stuff out, because I need you to heal my, and I know that that's the main thrust of this, but I just can't help but speculating about the possible future for this stuff. It's just incredible. I mean, just again, I know it's possibly not your area of expertise, but this question of AI, do you think AI can have self-awareness eventually?
I don't know.
Sorry, Pai.
No, that's totally fine. As Dan Dennett has said, can we make a conscious AI? Maybe. Should we make a conscious AI? probably should not. That was his answer. So I think he was much smarter than me. So I will take his word on that. I honestly am not super well versed and expert in this field, but I totally get his concerns and ideas. And as he said, like if we end up making a conscious AI, then not only are there ethical concerns, but there are ethical implications as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It absolutely has to be thought about. I'm not trying to kick the ethical questions into the long grass, but it's like I'm a data analyst, and sometimes I get you get the bureaucracy of having to deal with data governance and and all that kind of stuff. Like, no, I just want to do the maths, but look, we've done about an hour there, Pi, and I think is that do you want to carry on for a bit, or are you?
Yeah, I can carry on for a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So I'll just try and what are the other questions I had for you? So could we get into a bit more detail about these ion channels, right?
Yes.
And this is the sort of transmission technology that cells use, right?
Mm-hmm.
To do what exactly?
So going back to the background on bioelectricity I was mentioning, right? So the inside of the cell is negative, the outside of the cell is positively charged, right? And what these ion channels do is they allow, when they are open, and they can be opened under different conditions in response to different stimuli, they will allow these charges to go inside or outside, and hence, in effect, change the membrane voltage of the cells.
But what determines whether they allow or don't allow it?
Sorry?
What determines whether they allow or don't allow it?
Yeah, there is a plethora of signals different for each individual protein. So some are ligand-gated protein. By ligand, I mean like a chemical-gated channels. Some are voltage-gated, that is, they will change based upon what the cell's membrane voltage is. So there is a plethora of different signals that will open or close different channels. So yeah, each channel or each channel protein will have a set opening or closing signal.
And that is defined by what?
That is defined by the protein's architecture itself.
Right, and that is and actually that reminds me of another question as well, because you talked about the 3D architecture of proteins, didn't you? And that's a whole other world, isn't it? To sort of think about.
Which actually, interestingly, is heavily being accelerated by AI right now, because I remember 20 years ago when I was in it, I was manually trying to figure out the protein folding structures, but now AI algorithms can do so much better job at figuring out the protein structure, so which is an awesome deal right now.
But I mean, is this going to put people out of work?
I don't think so. I think it's just a question of the kind of questions that we are asking and kind of problems that we are thinking about needs to change. We can't just do a automated, repetitive kind of work. So yeah, I mean, it is probably the same situation as what it was during the Industrial Revolution. The kind of jobs are going to change, but the jobs are still going to be there.
Yeah, I think a good way of putting it was, I heard something the other day, is AI isn't going to take people's jobs. People with AI are going to take people's jobs. Do you know what I mean? So it's just that. So basically, it's like, if you didn't go over to the plow, you're not going to be harvesting as much crops as your neighbours, are you? So do you think we will just adjust around it? I know we're way off biology again here, aren't we? But do you think we'll adjust? New jobs will be created. It's just, we've been through this kind of thing before, or is this particularly revolutionary?
I think it is revolutionary for sure. And will we adjust? As I said, we will probably have to. I don't think we will have a choice in that matter, right? The society and the civilization as a whole seems to be moving in that direction. So either you ride the wave or let the wave fall over you.
Or it crashes down. That's really good. But yes, get back onto the biology again. So I want to hear a little bit more about these. You talk about these sort of 3D protein structures, and I know you mentioned AI, but So, what kind of shapes have we got, and why do they have these particular shapes? Is it to do with the way they interlock with other proteins, and is it like a
Yeah.
jigsaw puzzle? I mean,
No, think about them more like little buttons inside the buttons with a little hole inside the membrane. And the way that the structure is important is because they are not just random holes in the membrane. They will allow only specific kind of ions to pass through. So for example, sodium ion, there is a channel for sodium ion, so it will only allow sodium ion, and the way that it does is the way that its structure is inside the hole through which the sodium passes. It will only allow sodium ion because of the way where it binds and so on. And the opening and closing is based upon how it binds to either other chemicals. So it has these receptor moieties on its surface that binds to different chemicals, or if it is a voltage gated, it has these moieties that are sensitive to these positive and negative charges, which form the membrane voltage. So based upon the changes in that charge, the conformation or the structure of that protein will change and will allow the passage of that particular ion through it. So that's kind of sort of how it works in
right. So it's again, it's down to electrical behaviors and
electrochemical behavior.
Yeah. Do you think that? I mean, it's quite interesting. We talked about the physics that kind of sits underneath this, but as physics progresses, does that mean sort of, in some sense, biology has to kind of catch up with it? I mean, so I suppose in a way that there's a pointer there to sort of things like quantum biology. Do you have any knowledge of that and where that's going?
No, I'm sort of very peripherally aware of it, but not really deeply at all. I know that there is a huge field of biophotonics as well. There is a big field on effect of magnetic fields and geomagnetic fields on biology as well. But I'm not much into that. Not very versed or well read in that sphere at all.
What about microtubules? Because I mean, obviously you're a cell biologist, so I mean these form the structure of cells, don't they? But
absolutely.
And obviously you guys are interested in kind of cognition and intelligent decision making and stuff. And Stuart Hameroff says that these are responsible for, he says that actually, if you think of the processing capacity of the brain as just being made up of basic neurons, you're making a mistake because each neuron has a kind of a supercomputer inside of it. So.
Right.
Any views on those and what they're for? And
I mean, some of the stuff that definitely has been shown is that these microtubules act as relays for these charged particles. So there is definitely for lack of a better word, they serve as if they are wires going from the outside membrane of the cell to the inner organelles, and there are these positive these charged particles, sodium, potassium, these charged particles that go through these microtubules. So that much we know, but beyond that, I don't think it has been explored a whole lot, and that remains to be explored, that remains to be studied. So anything beyond that would be probably mostly speculation at this point.
Do you have any? Yeah. Do you have any intuition about them? I mean, do you think they will be relevant to your work at some point?
They absolutely are relevant. We just have to figure out in what way and how. So, for example, we know that when an embryo's left-right asymmetry is formed, so any embryo has like dorsal, ventral, left, right, just like us. So in that, bioelectricity plays a very important part, and in that, establishing that bioelectric asymmetry. A very important part is played by the microtubules, where they shuttle the ion channels and pumps in a asymmetric direction in the embryo that sets up the bioelectric field and so on. So at least in that aspect, we know, but I'm sure that there are a lot more other functions that they do that we just haven't explored at all.
So they're behind that chirality. Wow. So that is understood. I mean, I'm not a biologist, so I didn't realize that was actually understood. That's fantastic.
Yeah. That was work done in our group, probably I think about 10 or 15 years ago. Not by me, by other folks in the group. we had a subsection of the group working on left-right asymmetry and embryonic axis patterning. So they did that work.
So this reminds me of something to do with, the sort of metamorphic creatures. So that the butterfly remembering, the caterpillar's what it's learned, right? Despite being turned to mush, right, and then reconstituted. So this just confirms that those even behavioral memories, right? So not morphological, but your actual sort of episodes of that caterpillar's life somehow, or the engrams. So if we know that they're not in the brain, I suppose first of all opinions on where they are, but also it's I can't help it. Sorry, I just keep pushing you to the fringes. But at the same time, but also, is it the case that the kind of the bioelectricity that's going on is kind of it's all reducible to bioelectricity? So sort of thought, behavior, morphology, embryonic development, is the whole thing reducible to bioelectricity?
I'm not sure.
Because neurons brain cells do this stuff, don't they, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Electrical signals are very important and fundamental aspect of nature, if you will, in all its aspects.
Yeah.
And so it isn't super surprising that life has used it, or evolution has used it to sort of build up on it, use it in many, many, many different ways. And that's not surprising at all. How much and to what extent, that remains to be explored, right? So we don't know whether everything can be reduced to bioelectricity, or are there major chunks of it that can be that are regulated by bioelectricity. We are just actually at the beginning of the curve. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, too right. I mean, and we'll follow that with interest. But what do you think about these kind of Platonic truths? These other free gifts, if you like, that nature exploits. So sort of AND gates, and it's like logic comes as a free gift somehow. A really good example is when you throw those balls. I can't remember what they're called, but you throw the balls at the top and you end up getting a normal distribution. So where is that normal distribution?
Yeah, good question. We don't know that. I don't think we know that. Like, for example, I was going to say another example of this. Just left my mind. Anyways, but I don't think we understand that at all. Where those things are.
Yeah, it's just like a free gift, isn't it?
Yeah, somehow. Oh, I was going to say about the triangles, right? So
that's right. Yeah.
If you know the two angles of a triangle, the third angle is pretty much a free gift, right? From nature. So it's kind of like that. But how and where and why, we don't know yet. At least I don't know yet. So
but neither do I. I don't even know where to start. But that reminds me, actually, we're going back to the kind of protein morphology, right? So do you get? I seem to remember. Do you get kind of geometric forms? You get squares and triangles and things like that, in protein shape.
Yeah. These are they are geometrically, as I said, like they are more like holes, and they are generally made up of either 4 or 6 subunits.
Yeah.
So it's not a single protein. It's like multiple proteins that will either be duplicates or will be in a form like 2 of this protein and 2 of that protein, that kind of stuff. And then they will come together to form this whole. So yes, there is definitely a geometric component to that. For sure.
Because that sounds slightly odd. You sort of expect nature to be kind of curved, but then you get to the nitty gritty and you start seeing sort of triangles and stuff. That's quite crazy in a way. Do they have different sort of colors and things as well?
Colors? I don't think has anybody looked at. See, here you go into a little bit of a hairy field. What do you mean by color, right? So because it depends upon what light you are using, and what you're seeing and what your sensitivities are and so on. So I don't think I don't know if anybody has looked at them in terms of what color they have or not. There might be some reflective properties to them because of their shape and structure. So if you shine a light on them, what will reflect on? Generally, biological molecules seem to have what is called as an autofluorescence, as in self-fluorescence in the green range.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know if anybody has looked at that. At least I'm not aware of anybody who has looked at that on a protein level.
Maybe it does sound like a silly sort of scientific question. It's like, what, how pretty are they? I suppose in some sense, because we talk about them as building blocks. I'm thinking kind of, I can't help but get I'm thinking like children's kind of Lego, and and I think I have seen some pictures of 3D proteins that look like triangles and stuff. Am I just imagining that, or did I see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they can. Yeah, they form like they can form all kinds of proteins. Can fold in many different ways and form many different structures depending upon what their functions are. I think generally, and a lot of the diseases are about misfolding of the proteins and incorrect structures and so on.
Yeah. So, and that's fairly well understood, isn't it, based on the sort of DNA instructions, the way they're built. But it's still not understood where they're, how they get to where they're meant to be. Right.
Yeah.
The target morphology, and I suppose I still don't really understand. And I suppose that's what you guys are working on, isn't it?
Well, we are not mostly working. We're mostly not working on individual protein level. We are mostly working on like
the morphology.
Morphology level, morphology, but at the multicellular level. So we are mostly not doing anything at the individual protein level at all.
Cool. Right. Well, unless there's anything you particularly want to talk about, Pai, I think I think we've darted around quite a bit there, so apologies for that. But it's such an interesting subject. It's such an interesting subject, and sometimes my mind's just like, oh my god, what about this? What about this? And but thanks so much for spending the time and coming to talk to us. Yeah, it's a real pleasure chatting to you, and maybe come back at some point in the future, and we can talk about further progress, and hopefully I'll know a bit more, and I'll be able to ask better questions. But so I'll stop recording there, I think then.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.